Welcome to today's episode of EV Hub Live. EV Hub Live is a live video podcast for public policy professionals working to advance transportation electrification. EV Hub Live is recorded live, so to tune in and ask questions or check the schedule, please visit atlasevhub.com/live. On today's episode, we'll be discussing our domestic EV battery industry and how our battery technology is changing. We'll be hearing from Michael Tubman from Lucid Motors and Jeff Werner from Panasonic on the latest investments in EV batteries, workforce development potential, and how different regions have prepared or are preparing for battery production. Here's your host, Atlas Public Policy's founder, Nick Nigro.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to EV Hub Live. I'm super excited to talk about batteries today. I think it's one of the most exciting topics in transportation electrification these days because there's just so much money pouring in to manufacturing in the United States now because of IRA and other kinds of policy. I'm very pleased to have my guests here today joining us, Jeff from Panasonic and Michael from Lucid Motors. Before we get started, I just have to do one quick disclosure. My wife actually works at Lucid Motors. She is not the guest today, but her coworker, Michael, has joined us. And so welcome to you both, Michael and Jeff. We're going to jump right in and start with you, Jeff. So Panasonic, you've been working in the U.S. for a number of years, including producing lots and lots of battery cells at Tesla's Gigafactory in Nevada. Can you talk a little bit about some of your lessons learned in producing batteries domestically here in the U.S.?
Sure, Nick, and thanks for having me on. This is great. A topic we like to talk about. As you noted, Panasonic is a large Japanese-owned company. We've been in the U.S. for nearly 70 years. We've got about 20,000 people here, and the largest business that we have currently is in the EV battery business. As you noted, we have about 4,000 people in Reno at the Tesla Gigafactory. It's a Tesla facility, but we are one of the major tenants there. We're actually about 2/3 of the footprint. We're currently making 2 billion cells a year there, which we've been scaling up since about 2014. So in terms of lessons learned, there's quite a few of them, and I think it's on manufacturing on that scale. No matter what the industry has its challenges, and I think one of the first and foremost is labor availability. We've had some growing pains in Reno, but we've been managing to make that successful. And additionally, I think when you have the inputs that are needed to build 2 billion cells a year, that's also a challenge. And we're working very hard to stand up domestic sources, but it is a very global supply chain, and with that comes some complications. So I'd say I kind of pull those toward as sort of the two main areas that we've learned a lot on. And, they're not insurmountable, but it's stuff that we have to continue to work on as we move forward.
So I just have to clarify or follow up on one piece that you said. It's like 2 billion cells. Give the audience like a sense of scale. What does that mean in terms of cars?
Wow. In terms, I think the number, so I think always in terms of the cells, these are cylindrical cells, kind of almost like a large AA battery. I think we're talking about 180,000 cars per year off of that volume.
Amazing.
It's really, it is a highly automated process, but still requires 4,000 people to work that. I mean, operators is pretty high tech, high value manufacturing. But yeah, it's really you really can't believe it until you see it. The sort of the scale and size.
Yeah, we sold something like 950,000 EVs last year in the United States. So approaching 200,000 from one plant gives you really a sense of scale here. Speaking of scale, so last year your company announced a $4 billion investment. We're getting very accustomed to saying the word billion when it comes to EVs these days, and that's going to create another 4,000 jobs in Kansas. You broke ground on the site just recently, and it looks like it could be the largest manufacturing facility for batteries in the country. So tell us why you picked Kansas. I don't think that's the state people think of first when they think of not just auto manufacturing, but EVs in particular. And tell us a little bit more about the kinds of jobs you'll be hiring for there.
Sure. I think this sort of transition or revolution in EVs and EV manufacturing, whether it's cells or cars, is really going to shift what we think of as traditional automotive manufacturing. As a company, when we were looking to make an investment of this scale, we did a really extensive site selection process, which included, I think, about 13 different states, over 100 different sites. There's only a certain amount of sites that will work for a project of this scale. And we went in and, worked very closely with the state governments on, a lot of these things that we learned about in our first go around in Reno is, labor availability, location. Obviously, Kansas is in the center of the country. And as we are going to be servicing multiple customers from this location, we are looking at the ability to, in terms of supply chain, get the batteries to where they need to go. But I will say too that there were some great candidates. Some states do a very good job in attracting these types of investments, but Kansas really just did a fantastic job in terms of the way they were organized and the way they worked with all stakeholders in the state, right from the local level of DeSoto, Kansas, which is where the facility is going to be with 5,000 people, all the way up to the federal level. That sort of cooperative effort, working very closely with us as the investor, I think really sort of what pushed it over the edge. And it's been, we're about a year into this process now, and it's just been fantastic. We go in there, this is going to be a generational project, right? You don't build a battery facility of this magnitude. That's not, it's not a 5-year play, right? This is going to be decades. So that type of cooperation and partnership with the state is essential. And Kansas has just been first rate.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, speaking of new states to autos and EVs in particular, Michael, your company, Lucid Motors, began operations in Casa Grande, at your factory in Casa Grande in Arizona, back just a couple of years ago. And since then, you've talked about plans of expansion. Can you talk a little bit about what's been happening at the site and what you expect the next few years to look like?
Sure. Thanks for having me on today, Nick. So Lucid Motors is an all-electric auto manufacturer, and we're actually based out of Newark, California, in the Bay Area, where we do a lot of our design and engineering. But when we were looking for where we're going to manufacture the plant, there was a lot that drew us to Arizona. Everything from the workforce and the talent that was available there to the cooperation of the Arizona state government. And that led us to Casa Grande, Arizona, about halfway between Phoenix and Tucson, where we built our AMP1 facility. And we're very proud that it's the first purpose-built EV factory in North America. And so when it launched, we had a couple of different buildings there, under 1 million square feet of activity. We have a body and white shop, we have a general assembly plant, and about 15 minutes from the main AMP1 site, we have our powertrain facility, where we take those battery cells that Panasonic manufactures and put them into battery modules and powertrain that really drives our vehicle, literally. So now, at this point, we have more than 4,000 employees in the state of Arizona at the powertrain facility, AMP1, and some other facilities around the Phoenix area. And we've since starting our facility there, we've been able to hit a number of milestones. We started production of the Lucid Air sedan, which was our first car, and it had the distinction of winning the Motor Trend Car of the Year in 2022. And that really started the list of superlatives that the car demonstrated, everything from the longest EPA certified range in 520 miles for a vehicle. It has the fastest charging and the highest voltage battery. We have a 900 volt battery in the vehicle. But we're continuing to expand in Arizona and looking at the next round. We have our phase 2 plant construction underway now. And the idea is to allow us room for growth. In addition to the sedan that we're producing, we're looking to start production of the Lucid Gravity SUV in 2024. And then in the future point, we'll have additional vehicles, a third model at a lower price point. And all of that will increase the amount of jobs and economic activity in the state. We did an economic impact assessment, a third party did actually, when we started our construction in Arizona, and found that over 10 years, we'd be adding about $9 billion in personal income to the state. So this has real impact for workers in the state, and we're very proud to be there.
$9 billion. That sounds like a heck of a lot more than 4,000 jobs. Can you help us understand a little bit about the, economic impact of benefits of these factories? Where's that coming from?
Sure. It's about the fact that these are good paying jobs. These are manufacturing jobs above the median salary in Casa Grande area. Okay. And in addition to that, we're driving a lot of other activity throughout the state. Suppliers and others want to locate around us. We're helping to build the EV ecosystem in the state, which is already quite strong. One of the reasons that we got there, you can actually go from the mine mouth of critical materials in the state all the way to the EV production, with lots of stops in between where you have suppliers of all different types who are located there. And we're helping to increase demand for them and increasing the multiplier effect of our spending throughout the Arizona economy.
So what are some of the lessons learned you have from Casa Grande in the first few years of operating that facility?
That is a great question. Building the first purpose-built EV factory in North America should have provided us enough lessons on its own. But as you mentioned, we started doing this in 2020. So building the first purpose-built EV factory in North America from scratch during a pandemic and right before numerous supply shocks that no one anticipated or had ever seen before provided a lot of opportunities for learning. And so what we've been able to do over the last year or so is really get the facility in the place where we want it. Our CEO says that the first thing the company has to do is to be able to prove it can produce and manufacture vehicles. And we're doing that now. And over the last year, that's required putting the right leadership in charge of a very complex facility, working to make sure supply chains that we have that not just are in Arizona, but across 24 states and numerous foreign countries are able to more seamlessly bring those thousands of parts and components to this facility in rural Arizona. And, finally, I think it just required our CEO and leadership to be on the ground in Arizona at the factory, identifying and removing individual obstacles to smooth manufacturing as they came up. It was a very hands-on process, but the result has been, higher levels of production and being where we are at, being where we want to be in terms of manufacturing levels at the facility.
It's a cool little factoid about first ground up EV manufacturing facility. I think a lot of people would think, oh, Tesla must have done that. But the plant they started building Model S in was an old GM Toyota plant called the Numi plant out there in California. And so it's really interesting. So let's stick with you and bring in Lucid's recent partnership with Panasonic as a supplier for you all for the upcoming Gravity. Can you talk a little bit about the details of how that worked out?
I mean, it's an incredible and exciting partnership for us. For us as a smaller company, we're always looking to be able to guarantee supply chains that are secure and high quality. And with Panasonic, we have that. We announced the partnership back in December that the lithium-ion batteries that Panasonic produces are going to be a part of our current Lucid Air sedan and will be part of the Gravity SUV when that starts production as well. For the time being, until that plant in Kansas gets going, we're able to import some of those cells from Japan. And that's a good, strong, friendly supplier. And then we're excited to start using the cells from the Kansas facility when it's up and running. We take those cells and we put them into modules that power our vehicles. And it's really partnerships like this that are crucial for us to be able to ramp up our production and to be able to use American-made batteries in these American-made vehicles.
So you talked a bit about the supply chain, Jeff. I want to bring you back into the conversation now, and some of our lessons learned as all these factories get stood up. one of the concerns a lot of folks raise is on what to do with these batteries after they've ended their useful life in a vehicle. A lot of people think that the batteries are kind of useless in that sense. That couldn't be further from the truth. And so I'd love, Jeff, to hear a little bit more about the partnership you recently announced with this new battery recycling company started, I believe, by a Tesla alum called Redwood Materials. And so tell us a little bit about that and its implications on what you're doing in Kansas.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really exciting part of this is that there, as you noted, there is value in these batteries once they, come through their lifespan within the vehicle. And Redwood is a really exciting company also in Nevada near our facility in Reno, which is really monetizing the recycling process for these batteries. And it's not just EV batteries, it's all lithium ion batteries. It's something that we see as a really critical part of the overall supply chain, a part of it, right? We're still going to need access to global supply chains. We still need to bring online sources here in North America. But I think that this will play an increasingly important part on some really critical areas like copper foil, which we're already starting to use within our own supply chain, and eventually cathode anode material, I think in 2025. And as these, as the EVs do start to come towards the end of their lifespan, this is going to increase the volume there and really provide what we call a circular economy. This was going to be an issue that needed to be dealt with anyway, right? We have this in other parts of our business. We at one time sold a lot of televisions, and many states require a certain amount of recycling of those. So we have stood up businesses in those areas that take on the recycling of those that material and monetize it, right? It's not, in some cases it pays for itself, it generates some money, and what it does is it creates this circular economy. It gets this out of the waste chain, and it really it's good for the environment. It's good for business. And I think that what Redwood has found is a really critical part of that supply chain. It's going to be good for business, and we're really excited about this partnership. And I think it's something we need, right? These are materials that we need, that can often come from parts of the world where the supply chains maybe can get a little complicated, and I think this just adds to our resilience.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people talk about concerns regarding the supply chain. We all experienced implications of that with the pandemic. When you brought up Panasonic making TVs, I thought you were going to talk about what I used to have on my kitchen counter when I was growing up, a Panasonic pencil sharpener. So anyway.
Made everything at one point or another.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Okay. So let's talk some policy. This is a policy shop at Atlas. This is a policy focused show. So to the both of you, Inflation Reduction Act, when that was enacted, clearly it was a game changer on a number of levels. I think, Michael, when your company was starting to build the facility in Casa Grande, I'm sure you didn't anticipate what the Inflation Reduction Act was going to do to the market. And so I'd love to hear from both of you, beginning with Michael, about how the enactment of that law and now its implementation is affecting how you look at domestic EV manufacturing and EV uptake in general in the US. Let's start with Michael first.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is a total game changer in terms of the opportunities that it provides for a new company like ours. We're just at the beginning of our manufacturing story, and the incentives that are available for new manufacturers to encourage the production of clean energy materials and products in the United States are really fantastic for a company like ours. We're specifically looking at the Section 45X production tax incentives. These help to encourage the production of all types of clean energy products in the US, and among them are battery modules. We're a vertically integrated manufacturer to the extent that we can. So we take those cells and then we put them in modules and packs on our own in our factory in Arizona. And this IRA incentive will help us to not just continue doing that, but it helps us reduce our costs. It helps us become more competitive globally. We export our vehicles to Canada, to Europe, to the Middle East. And so having this assistance and this incentive will really help to drive our production. Now, for
just real quick follow-up on that. So a lot of people are fixated on the consumer credits, 45X, what you talked about. I'm guessing a small fraction of people who know about EVs know about what that means. How valuable is that to the car per car? Do you know?
Well, it has a value in terms of module production, $10 per kilowatt hour tax incentive.
Okay.
So that's quite valuable.
Yeah, sounds it. So
now,
sorry, keep going.
Well, and you bring up the point of the consumer tax incentive where a lot of the attention has been brought. And, I think that actually represents kind of a lost opportunity. We've known for a long time through multiple studies that point of sale purchase rebates and tax incentives are some of the strongest drivers of EV adoption. And the reason we want EV adoption is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and hasten this transition to clean energy. Unfortunately, the 30D tax incentive had a number of restrictions placed on it in terms of the eligibility of taxpayers to apply for it. And we're seeing the number of vehicles that are eligible for the credit, really decrease. And the guidance isn't even complete yet. For a company like Lucid, we're just starting our journey. We're starting our first car production, and having our vehicles excluded from that tax incentive is a really unfortunate side effect, and really slows some of the transition to electrification that we were looking for.
Jeff, what about you guys and over at Panasonic when it comes to IRA? I can't imagine you were the Kansas thing. Maybe it wasn't going to happen in Kansas, or maybe it was, or maybe you accelerated it. So that stuff must have been set in motion long before then. But tell us more about how IRA is affecting the way you're doing business here in the U.S.
Yeah, I think the IRA is really a significant accomplishment in terms of the promotion of the EV, the full EV sector here in the United States. Our president of our energy company likes to say that we'll look back in 10 or 20 years from now with a thriving EV sector here in the United States, and manufacturing in particular, and we'll look back on this at this point as the turning point. I will say, as a company, Panasonic had made the decision to have the United States as our manufacturing base for batteries, starting back in 2014 with the partnership with Tesla. And we're looking to expand that and grow that, which you see now in Kansas. So those decisions were made before the IRA. But what the IRA does is really provides the economic certainty for making these massive CapEx bets, right, to stand up these facilities. It really it brings additional capital, which is kept here in the United States. It's used towards advancing and being maybe a little bit more aggressive on the timelines for additional investments and standing up these manufacturing facilities. So it really, it's a significant game changer, and I think we're only just seeing the impacts right now. So without it, I think you would still see a growing EV sector here in the United States. With companies like Lucid, who are American companies building in the United States, having a U.S. source for its cells is critical. So that's why we're doing it, right? We're here in the United States. But that additional, I'd say, sort of safety net of the additional capital really just, I think, makes a more bullish stance from the investment side.
I think back to the first round of EVs in early 2010 or so. I was out in Michigan taking a tour of a new manufacturing facility that was trying to be stood up. This was when EV demand was very small and there was a lot of uncertainty, but a similar sort of political momentum and interest in making sure that EVs are made here in the US. And I remember taking a tour of this facility, and there's not a lot going on there. And I was just like, man, I don't know if this is going to work out the way that the policymakers want. And now you look at IRA and all of the billions that have been announced since it was enacted, and it's just like the timing of legislation really matters a lot. And it seems like IRA is coming at the right time. Michael, let's talk a little bit about your car. You were you're bragging a bit about the awards it has won so far and its accolades. I've driven it myself. It's a great car, no doubt about it. It's got a very long range, charges very fast, kind of checks a lot of the boxes for concerns of potential EV drivers, particularly in the segment you're targeting, the luxury segment. So tell us about why it's so special. Like, what makes it so advanced?
Yeah, so we got a really long range, 520 miles. That is the distance from our office here in DC to Detroit. So it really should address those remaining concerns about range anxiety. And some, ways that you could combat range anxiety would be just to stuff additional batteries into a vehicle. And we took a different route. Our company is relentlessly focused on efficiency. We look to try to get the most range and action from every little bit of battery and component that goes into the vehicle. And so that means that we have the most efficient vehicle around. We can get 4.6 miles per kilowatt hour if you measure it that way. You can measure it as 141 miles per gallon equivalent. Any way you talk about it, it's a lot of range for the battery that's in the vehicle. And that's developed in a number of different ways. We look not just at the powertrain efficiency, but we look at aerodynamics, we look at reducing road load, all different aspects of the vehicle. And some of that is physical, but a lot of it is due to software and making sure that we're designing the operations of the system as best we can. And it's our vision that efficiency take a greater role in how we think about EVs. And we've talked a lot about the supply chain challenges that the batteries have faced. And if we can make better use of the batteries that we have and that we're making, then that means a lot of societal benefits. For customers, it means they can get farther on less electricity, reducing their costs. It means that battery packs in vehicles might not have to be as large to satisfy consumers, which could thereby reduce the costs of vehicles and make them more affordable, since batteries are a substantial cost component of EVs. And then if you look even bigger, you start talking about the fact that reducing electricity use means that we've got fewer upstream emissions from the power sector, less effects on grid stability. And then for manufacturers, using less materials is, of course, easier on the supply chain strains and makes manufacturing cars a little bit easier and cheaper. So we really see a future for efficient EVs. The federal government has been mandating for almost 50 years that internal combustion engine vehicles get more efficient through the CAFE program. We haven't even started talking about what the federal government and state governments can do to start encouraging efficiency and efficient use of batteries in the EV sector.
Yeah, I think y'all are onto something there, just because, for so long it was about, it has been, and it will continue to a great extent be about swapping out combustion engines for electric drivetrains. But there are going to be markets in the near future where over half of them are adoption is EVs, and energy efficiency is going to start to become a thing again too, just like it is in the power sector. So I do think that policymakers would be wise to pay closer attention to it, particularly as adoption starts to hit critical points in certain markets. Okay, so I got one last question for you both. Forward-looking, ideally optimistic, but I'll leave that up to you. But what is one battery tech development that you all are watching closely? And we'll start with Jeff and go back to Michael.
Well, I guess I'll start with our own battery tech, right? There's a couple of things.
Sure.
Over time, the inputs and the critical minerals that are going in are going to change. We're already looking at reducing significantly the amount of cobalt that is needed. But I think one of the really kind of exciting things that we're doing now is the size of the battery. We're going from a, sort of what we call the 2170, which is a smaller battery, to a larger 4680, which is, basically named after the dynamic, the measurements. And what that does is, in addition to creating, additional capacity within the battery and output, it reduces the materials that are needed to go in to build these batteries. So we are essentially making it more efficient. We're requiring less steel and other inputs. And I think this is going to really open up, this sort of the next generation. It's going to open up a lot of options for companies like Lucid that are really at the cutting edge of this. And, we're providing sort of the cells to do that. So, these are changes and are incrementally changing over time. And I think as this moves on, and particularly as more investment is flowing into this space, it's only going to accelerate.
Man, again, you're making me reminiscent of the early days of EVs, where all of the super smart people that I looked up to in research were just like, lithium ion's not going to be there. It's not going to do it. We're not going to get to where you want with EVs. We need a breakthrough, a scientific breakthrough. And that just kept pushing out the timeline for when EVs would become mainstream. And, I've talked with at least a couple of those folks in recent years, and they're just like, yeah, I was wrong about that. And so here we are. These new cell developments are, incremental improvements relative to some sort of major scientific breakthrough. And that makes it much more feasible that we'll get there. So really appreciate that comment, Jeff. And Michael, what about you?
Well, from our standpoint as an auto manufacturer, looking at what companies like Panasonic are doing is really exciting. We're looking at the end result, trying to find partners that are able to provide batteries for our vehicles that have less of these critical materials, stronger supply chains. All the things that Jeff mentioned are the goals of the work that his company is doing. And so for us, it's really about finding the developments that will help us not only make those batteries here in the United States and in friendly countries, but also to continue to be able to have efficient use of them. So what is it that we can do to make better use of the batteries that we have, whatever their chemistry and whatever their makeup? How can we as a company contribute to that? And how can we work with our industry partners and the government to collaborate and make a system where we are using whatever batteries we have most efficiently and for the betterment of the climate and the country?
Well, this was a really wonderful discussion. I greatly appreciate you both joining me, Michael and Jeff. Thanks so much for all of you watching EV Hub Live. Catch us again soon, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
See you, Michael.
Bye, Jeff.